Welcome back, everyone. We are back. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Big Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden. And on today's episode, it's a little weekend recap and a look into a couple of big-time injuries to two big-name goalies, a dive into Tuesday's DFS and big-time betting boards to make this money. The playoffs are coming, baby, so let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're back. Hope you didn't miss us, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Big Flip Livingstone and Mr. Steele Roden. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Network, and you can find us across all platforms you find your favorite content. We are free and available every single day, Monday to Friday, so thank you for showing us that love. On today's episode, you know what you can find, what we do best, DFS targets, a couple of picks, some locks of the night. That's all coming up. We'll break that down for you coming up around the break. But first, Steele and I need to take a look at a couple of big-time injuries to two big-name Eastern Conference goalies that will be heading to the playoffs. Carey Price is back. It's a little Tuesday goalie special, Steele. I'm always intrigued to hear what you have to think about, one, these injuries, those impact, and two, maybe we start here, seeing Carey Price back on the ice, which honestly, at the end of the day, regardless of what team you support, this is one of the best to ever do it, arguably the best goalie of this generation, and just great to see him back on the ice at the end of it all.
Yeah, I'm glad he's back on the ice, and to see him in the crease, get his first game under him, a step in the right direction for himself and the Montreal Canadiens moving forward. I know there's a handful of games left, but to still get these reps in before going into the offseason where you can, work on yourself, your health, your physically, mentally, work on your health, everything, and then get ready for the next season as well. Just get those couple of games under you, I think is really good to see for Carey Price.
The fact that also it wasn't just an injury recovery, right? Like, sure, there was the recovery from surgery, and that's always a serious thing. But potentially even more serious is his openness with battling substance abuse, alcohol addiction specifically. That's a dark thing to deal with. That's no joke ever. Hey, he's a Montreal Canadien. I don't have much love for that team as a stark Toronto Maple Leaf supporter, but Carey Price deserves his credit, aside from all the on-ice accolades, to come back from something like that and be so open with it. I think that was a special moment there with his kids on Saturday night. Good to see him back in the cage. Didn't get the win. That's okay. 3-0 shutout by the Islanders. But hey, man, Carey Price has been a fantasy stud for a number of years. It might be an interesting offseason conversation, Steele, to see what this means for him. You mentioned the last week of the season. Maybe he can get a few games under his belt, get the conditioning up, have a good offseason, and come back and be, who knows, not maybe a top 5 guy anymore, but still effective. Yeah. I think, given how good he was last playoff run, I think he's still got it.
Yeah, he's a strong individual with everything that he's gone through and how open he is about the situation that he's been dealing with. And, kudos to him for getting back, finally feeling ready to get back in the crease. I think his fantasy value will obviously drop a decent amount, but again, he's still a top tier goalie. He's going to be the starting goalie for the Montreal Canadiens, hopefully next season, and he'll still be very viable.
Speaking of starting goalies, this is a time of year that you do not want your number one going down with any kind of injury. Obviously, for both the Pittsburgh Penguins and Carolina Hurricanes, Stanley Cup aspirations for both teams. Two teams that might have to go through each other at some point. Look, man, I saw the Andersen injury. That one looks a little bit more concerning if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, in my opinion, Steele. I don't know what you think about that, but please take this conversation away.
Well, it's definitely concerning, especially for fantasy owners, as we're getting down, like I said, the last handful of games, and you're in crunch time, you're in the playoffs. This is obviously a huge hit to your fantasy team. So there's really not much you can do, because unless you're in a small fantasy league, there's not a ton of goalies out there to pick up right now who are getting, the reps and for the last couple of games. So for fantasy owners, super, super tough. But for Carolina, I think it's a little bit better than it actually is. As you know, as we're getting down to the last couple of games, the standings are finalizing. We're kind of seeing a playoff picture right now. And if things stay as they are as of right now, the Carolina Hurricanes will be playing the Boston Bruins. They've played 3 times in the regular season and have absolutely destroyed them every single time, going 3-0 and getting the 3 wins and outscoring them 16-1. They had 2 shutouts against the Boston Bruins. So I think even if this injury, if they hold them out until even if the first game of the playoffs, and if Antti Raanta has to go in, I think they can get away with that because they've shown they've really dominated the Boston Bruins this season. Antti Raanta has a decent record, 12-5-4 with a .914 save percentage. I think if they want to play it safe and let him rest up until the playoffs, that might be a smart move.
I think you have to. Also, given the track record that Frederik Andersen has, we know he's not the most durable of goalies. Not to say he's potentially injury prone per se, but we know that this goalie has had, and some serious ones, right? A couple knocks to the head, couple of neck injuries, couple of whiplash issues. Look, you have to play it safe with a guy like Freddie Andersen. He caught an edge in that game Saturday. He has been in the Vezina conversation almost all year long. 35, 14, and 3, .922 save percentage. If this guy can't go for the playoffs, though, Steele, where do you think, I'm interested to hear. I wanted to ask you this when I was thinking about this off air. Let's say he's not ready to go game 1, Antti Raanta, game 2 even. How does this affect Carolina's chances getting out of the first round? You still think they're out of the first round without Carolina, even in they get anyone other than Boston? Do you think they still get out?
I think they still have a good chance of getting out. Obviously, the chances decrease without Frederik Andersen in the crease, but Antti Raanta is a solid backup goalie, and I think he can get away with the first or second game. I don't think he'll be able to last a full series potentially. Maybe the first round, but again, I don't think Frederik Andersen will be out that long, especially for a first series. But we all know how tough the Boston Bruins are to play against, even with the team they have right now. Jeremy Swayman, Linus Ullmark are solid in net right now. Charlie McAvoy on the back end, even though he's a small guy, he's physical. So I still think Carolina has a better shot to get out of the first round. But obviously with Frederik Andersen, it decreases a little bit.
For sure. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bruins. Stay tuned for big time bets and DFS targets and their current situation in a few minutes. But realistically, a goalie injury at this time, fantasy wise, it's a critical blow, potentially critical blow to the on-ice success of these teams. And one of those teams who really can't afford it is the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have been sputtering of late. Just lost a tough game on Saturday that I watched to those Boston Bruins. A 2-1 game, managing only 1 goal on a Saturday against an Eastern rival at this point in time. I don't know what you think, Steele. That's a bad indication of where your team is headed right now. And bang, add in a little Tristan Jarry injury, and things are going from bad to worse real quickly in Pittsburgh.
And this injury brings a lot more concerns for me than the Frederik Andersen. As of right now, Frederik Andersen, he's going to be getting an MRI in the next couple of days. As of right now, it says Tristan Jarry is out week to week with a lower body injury. And like I said, for the Carolina Hurricanes, as the playoffs stand right now, the Pittsburgh Penguins are either facing the New York Rangers, who have gone 3-1-0 in their last 4 games this season. So they've dominated the Pittsburgh Penguins, or they're playing the Florida Panthers, the Florida Panthers if Washington can catch up to Pittsburgh. So either way, if the Washington Capitals can pick up to where Pittsburgh is right now and they fall down to the 8th, the second wildcard spot, they're playing the Florida Panthers in that situation, and you're going up against the top scoring team in the NHL. So there's a lot more concern for the Pittsburgh Penguins right now, especially because they're not getting depth scoring. You're really relying on that top line of Sidney Crosby, Brian Rust, and Jake Gensel out there. Evgeny Malkin suspended still, so everything's just going wrong.
Also, I would think very quickly, just at a surface glance, who would you rather have in support of your number 1 goalie going down? I don't think it's Casey DeSmith. I think I'm going with Antti Raanta, if those are my 2 options. So that's another thing to be said here. And let's wrap this conversation up right after the break, because we got to pay the bills. I got to tell you about betonline.net as your number 1 source for all your sports betting stats and info. Find all the latest sports development, league reviews, news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the kickoff of the Major League Baseball season. My fantasy team sucks, but the BetOnline odds are great. It is your number one spot for everything sports wagering, the info, live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and all the action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thank you for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. For your next listen, you have to check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. You don't want to miss out on all the highlights. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, just like this podcast right here. So if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Once you do, you'll get the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Flip, 10 games on the schedule for Tuesday night. A lot of juicy matchups out there. And I'm going to start off right here. The Minnesota Wild are absolutely dominating right now. And one of the big reasons for how well they're playing, and obviously Kirill Kaprizov is one of the reasons, but the biggest reason is actually Kevin Fiala. The guy's been tearing it up for the Minnesota Wild the last 2 weeks, 12 points in his last 6 games for that matter. Kaprizov, he didn't record a point in that 5-4 overtime win over the Sharks over the weekend. But again, he's breaking records right now. He's continuing to score. He's continuing to get assists. So I'm going with those two forwards, even though they're not on the same line. And then I'm throwing Cam Talbot or Marc-Andre Fleury for this game as well as my goaltending prospect. So I love all three of those players, the way they've played over the last, pretty much since the trade deadline. And they've been really rocking the boat for the Minnesota Wild.
Look, Carey Price is back for the Montreal Canadiens. I thought maybe that might, just kind of pick them up a little bit because, and we don't need to get into it because it's been well documented. Montreal is sliding heavy again. They had those couple of weeks right after Marty St. Louis was hired where they started to turn the page a little bit. But look, this team is now rebuilding again. They are trying to figure out really what is the makeup of this franchise. Some good young players coming up. But what I wanted to say is you have to continue to bet against this team, DFS-wise, straight up and prop-wise, down the last couple of games here. Because, look, you said it, Steele. Mini is starting to look like the team that their front office believed in them to be, right? A Stanley Cup threat. They went out there and proved they gave them the tools, and this team has responded. Tough loss against the Blues 6-5 the other night. Yeah. And I just wanted to say, because you pointed this out, I think you texted me 2 weeks ago when they played each other the previous game, and you were like, dude, we need to see 7 games of these two teams going toe-to-toe. And they've been two of the better teams over the last couple of weeks. The Blues have 9 in a row.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, building itself into being one of those great first-round series. And, hey, it's almost like the Wild are getting ready for it right now and playing great in a big way. And you highlighted those guys. So also Montreal, yeesh.
Yeah. And that's actually the second matchup where I went to, the Minnesota Wild. You said it, they're playoff ready right now. We're going to see that awesome series against the Blues. That's the second matchup I'm going to as well. The Blues taking on the Bruins Tuesday night. And how great has Tarasenko been for them? 15 points in his last 6 games. Throw Robert Thomas in there as well. He's on a 12-game point streak himself. Those two guys are undeniably the best players on the St. Louis Blues team this year. And you have to continue to go back to them because as the St. Louis Blues are rolling right now, those two players are carrying them on this 9-win streak right now. So those two players you got to look out for too.
I think the Blues, and again, we've talked about this team at length. I don't need to get into it. To me, how many times have I said there's going to be some really great teams left on the cutting room floor after the first round of this playoffs? Maybe more so than we've seen in recent memory because there's kind of like the pretenders cut early. But man, the St. Louis Blues on the back of Tarasenko. Tarasenko, by the way, first star of the week in the NHL, and I'm going to talk about him around the break for Big Time Bet Steal, but this is the game I was targeting. The St. Louis Blues, to me, have all the pieces to make a deep playoff run. Torrey Krug, Colton Parayko on the back end, underrated defense core. I think they also have Justin Falk. I know who's had his struggles, still a pretty good blue line core. And Ville Husso has had a great season, very underrated goalie. But holy crap, has Tarasenko been good? 4 goals. Wait, what did he have? 7 goals and 11 points last week, including 2 game winners. So I don't think you can go wrong. You definitely have to have a look at him in your DFS targets for tonight, most definitely.
Hey, he was a big reason why I won my fantasy matchup last week.
Nice.
Absolutely killed it back-to-back games. I think he had
Nice.
7 points in 2 nights. It was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I do have a third matchup, though, for Tuesday to look out for.
Let's
I think
hear it.
this is a game that you can potentially use for cheaper options, guys under 3,000 that can still bring a lot of value. But first, I want to highlight some of the defensemen. The Tampa Bay Lightning taking on the Detroit Red Wings. It's their 4th and final meeting this year. Tampa has won all 3 games. The last 2 for the fact have been under the number. They've scored 5 or less goals in the last 2 games, but the first one was a 7-6 overtime win, 13 goals scored in that game. So for defensemen, I would obviously target Victor Hedman or Moritz Seider, but I think there's a lot of guys on the bottom 6 forwards for both teams that are going to be cheap options and can still bring a lot of value. And I think this is going to be a very high scoring game.
And also, Steele, looking at this lineup of games overall for Tuesday night, a lot of really juicy looking situations. And I think I've mentioned to you before on and off air that sometimes when I see this many juicy games, it's maybe time to take a breath because things never look as good as they are. But man, taking just a quick glance, like even so, how about Rangers at home against the Jets? I'd be taking a look at that bottom 6. You mentioned Tampa Bay at home against Detroit, Florida against New York Islanders, Toronto at home against Philly. Lots of really good teams in good spots going up against really bad teams, like the best in the league against the worst in the league.
Yeah.
So let's see how this pans out tonight. I'll be taking a look at one game in particular for my big time bets. And I think, actually, I know you're going to love what I have coming up around the break.
All right. I think I know what you're leaning towards, but I'll let you save it for big time bets.
Please.
But first, Flip, I have to let everyone know about Rock Auto. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now almost impossible for local chain auto parts stores to have what you need in stock. There's so many intimidating and often pointless questions. I know myself, I'm not a car guy. I get very confused when asking these questions, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You have devices with access to rockauto.com at your home or in your pocket. Save time, save money when using Rock Auto. And why would you choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a local chain auto parts store or a car dealership when you can save your money and time using Rock Auto? For example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $350 from a dealership when it's $215 from Rock Auto. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you there. Amazing selections, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need from rockauto.com. Thank you for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. Don't forget, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast, which also includes YouTube. So hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support out there. So thank you so much for that. Flip, 10 games on the schedule, a lot of advantageous bets to be made.
Yep.
I'll throw it over to you because you teased it a little bit. I think I know where you're going with this, so take it away.
These are one of the nights, Steele, that I am going to be putting out my 3 favorite picks on this show, but I will be having a bunch of bets going because I said it just before the break. I have a feeling this might be one of the last great spots to really hammer some advantageous situations for teams that are rounding into form, and that these last couple of games really do matter for playoff positioning. So I have 3 picks for this show, but make sure you hit us up on our Twitter account, Locked On Fantasy NHL. At Twitter, hit us up, slide in the DMs, make sure you are on it. Lots of picks coming up for Tuesday, but Steele, my 3 picks for the sake of this show, including my lock of the night, all come from the same game. I'll give you all 3, baby. It's the Big Flip Triple Dip Special. We missed yesterday, back in a big way. I'm going right to the St. Louis Blues, baby. The hottest team in the league. I say this win streak hits double digits. One of the best home teams in the league. Let's start there. 26-9-4, have won 6 straight at home right now, including actually the last game they played against the Bruins was in Boston. Convincing 4-2 win for the Blues. Look, Bruins just got handed some tough injury news. Lindholm out for the week. Pasternak out for the week. Linus Ullmark going to miss at least 1 or 2 starts. All of those guys should be ready for the first round at some point, so I'm not ready to hit the panic button in Boston just yet. But this is going to be a tough week without those guys, Steele. However you slice it, I don't care who you are. You lose guys that important, it's going to be tough. I'm not saying they're going to drop like a stone, but I will say they lose this game against St. Louis, who have been too hot, man. I'm going to just keep going and give you my other 2 picks and finish this off real quick. And you got to go back to the boy, the number 1 star in the league, the hottest scorer, number 5 Russian in the league, according to Mr. Steele Rodin, and deservedly so. Holy crap, has this guy been good this year, Steele? I know you're a big Tarasenko guy. I think you have him in a couple of your leagues. Let's give him some love for a quick second. 33 goals, 43 assists. How about more impressive? 9 game-winning goals. This guy is clutch. That is a good thing for the Blues come playoffs, especially against a great team like the Wild. Vlad Tarasenko, how about 8 goals over his last 5 games? Give me Tarasenko anytime goal scorer. I'm going right back to the well. That's not my lock of the night. The lock of the night is the Blues on the money line, and I'm putting a cherry on this bad boy. Over 6 goals as well. The St. Louis Blues, if you just take a quick glance at their games, in a lot of high-scoring games. 9 goals, 10 goals, 11 goals the other night against the Predators, I believe, total. This one smells like a high-scoring game on a little bit of a banged-up Bruins team. I think the Blues keep rolling, so I'm going for a big flip, triple dip special. Blues money line for my lock. Tarasenko, anytime goal scorer, and over 6 goals total for my 3 picks of Tuesday Night Steele.
I absolutely love the flip triple dips, and I went with a triple dip myself, actually.
Yes.
First of all, I love all 3 of those picks, so I'm definitely going to hammer those for Tuesday night.
Thank
my
you.
triple dip is coming from the Minnesota Wild Montreal Canadiens game.
Yeah.
First of all, taking the Wild on the puck line against the Canadiens. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game in their favor, and they've been absolutely putting some crooked numbers up. They're getting a ton of offense from Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello, Fiala, even Frederik Goudreau now a little bit. So I'm taking the Wild on the puck line as my first pick. My second pick of the night, over 6.5 goals. I might drop it down to 6, but as of right now, it's at 6.5. I'm going to take the over because they're putting up some crooked numbers. We know that Montreal can still score with Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, so I feel comfortable taking the over in this situation. But like Tarasenko, the guy on my team has been absolutely killing it for the Minnesota Wild. I'm taking an anytime assist from Kevin Fiala, absolutely carrying the Minnesota Wild up front right now alongside Kirill Kaprizov. That is my lock of the night and my triple dip flip.
Kevin Fiala is one of those guys that I think what we do on this show is really trying to highlight some of the players that the regular media does not. Kevin Fiala is one of those hockey players that does a little bit of everything well, and this year is doing it very well, and I think deserves a lot of credit. And these are the guys, Steele, in my opinion. Sure, you have the Kaprizovs, the Zuccarellos, the go-tos, right? These are the guys that get it done in the playoffs for these teams. Yeah. These are going to be the guys that have to separate themselves, bury a couple of big goals, and that's how playoff series are won. So I think I'm loving both of these triple dips. It might be an expensive night. Apologies to my fiance, but let's get this money. Hey, exciting time of the season. This is winding down and shaping up to be a great week, so stay tuned. We'll be here all week. And yeah, man, I'm loving these picks.
A lot of great picks for tonight. We might even send out a couple more on Twitter as well, not involving the St. Louis Blues and Minnesota Wild as we just highlighted, but pencil it in, lock it in. Definitely got to hammer these 2 triple dips because the Wild and St. Louis Blues are absolutely killing it right now in their division, battling for home ice advantage. Take advantage of these advantageous spots as well, especially against the Boston Bruins and Montreal Canadiens. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode and making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast your first listen every day. If you want more gambling advice on what you should pick, but for not just hockey, make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q with insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, just like this podcast right here. So please, if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support out there. And once you do hit the button, you'll get the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast as soon as they're available each and every day, Monday to Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. You don't want to miss out on all the content coming up. Playoffs around the corner. We're going to be throwing big time bets out there every single day, so you don't want to miss out. Thank you again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.